Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss my thoughts, as the long-term viewers will understand I have thoughts on this, about a bit of an announcement. Tomorrow there's to be a reception for like dozens of social media content creators at Downing Street who have been involved with the government on presenting, I suppose, news on what the government are doing through their various channels for quite some months. I'm just going to go through what's said in this media thing. So it says, this is on Politics Home. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to read the whole thing. But I'll just read the first bit. It says, Politics Home understands that Number 10 will open its doors to between 70 and 90 content creators on Thursday afternoon. The invite list includes influencers, blah, 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 blah. The invitees are understood to have a combined following of 250 million followers. The reception will include panel discussions about how creators can best work with government, as well as exploring creators' own careers. This is very good. It sounds very much like I talked before when I was invited to, I've not been invited to this, a climate conference to specifically talk about this same thing. How can we get messages out on this through social media? So what do? They invited content creators to discuss that. This is excellent. I'm just going to go on to one more little bit here. This is important before I go through some more thoughts. It says government sources told Politics Home that content creators have now become embedded into every government department's communication strategy, with some influencers now receiving press notices from the government alongside traditional news outlets. Digital influencers are invited to press conferences and receive background briefings from government ministers on topics relative to their content. Absolutely excellent, excellent. Slight caution in they're saying this has already been set up, at which point I'm thinking, maybe more needs to be done then, because it's not having the desired effect as yet, but it is still a very, very good move. I would also caution this bit where it says invited to press conferences. Now this is good because simply getting press briefings isn't enough. Like a day, I'll go over that in a moment, but that's not enough. You need to give them the opportunity to ask questions. That would be much more useful. Now, if what they're doing is inviting people along in the same traditional way they do with normal journalists, that's no good, because then you can only get in people who are based in and around London. That is not necessarily where those content creators are going to be living. But again, just the kernel of this is excellent. Now, where I have further thoughts, let's break this up into two different angles. So the first angle, I suppose, is in terms of what the Labour government are clearly trying to do, even though I am guessing a little bit of it because it's not been fully explained yet. The second is from the angle of what Labour are not trying to do in order to explain where the gaps still are. So in terms of what they're trying to do, it looks like this. So first of all, they've recruited people who do not seem to discuss politics, but other important issues to people's lives. This is very good, by the way. A lot of people do not seek out political content on social media. In fact, I've said a few times that in the last year there has, and I've had this confirmed by YouTube, there's been a noticeable drop in a certain type of audience, shall we say, certainly that is my type of audience, you guys, actively leaving politics alone since last summer. A lot of people got burnt out by it, various other reasons. So for a certain type of audience, that audience is now shrunk. On the more sort of extreme ends, yes, the very shouty channels still do well, but other channels are struggling. So the idea of getting your news through, say, political content creators like me is going to be much less useful, because first of all, I'm already going to discuss these things, and in terms of the politics, right? I would not find these things useful. So getting it through, like engaging with people who are just presenting important issues, superb, because everything's important. Everything that is important to people's lives is also politics. Finances are politics, energy is politics, transport's politics, music, like television, culture in general is politics. Everything's politics, because everything has to exist in an environment which is determined by government policy. So the idea of including people who discuss what the government are doing in their own sort of niche, their field, is excellent. And again, I draw that parallel with when I went along with another group of content creators to that climate conference, because I'm not doing climate issues every single day. It's not always relevant, and sometimes, you know, and you have to make sure it's relevant to your audience. That's going to be a key thing. They say they're discussing these things in Downing Street tomorrow. That is one thing all of those content creators will say. You know, it has to, they're not, you know, each content creator is not going to report on everything the government wants them to report on. That's no good. It'll just be making sure they've got the information so that if they can find an opportunity and want to, and it's interesting to their audience, they can mention it. That is still valuable to the government. But I will just say one thing. In terms of, I've looked at the list of some of the names mentioned. It's not an exhaustive list, so I could be getting this wrong. I've looked at it, and YouTubers seem to be conspicuous by their absence. Now, like I say, maybe that's not the case. Maybe this Politics Home report just didn't mention any. But they are, and I think that's a mistake. So first of all, what you look at, so who are the content creators? They're ones who are going to be engaging very much with a young audience, which again, really good. And I can see where Labour are coming from with this one. Young people do not engage with the news on mainstream media. Most young people get their news on social media. So you need to get a direct line out to young people. Absolutely what they need to do. But I would say if they're not including people with a large following on YouTube, and as I say, I don't mean political content creators. This is clearly a strategy about getting people who don't do overtly political stuff to just talk about what the government's doing within their sphere, which is, you know, a good idea. But I think there's two mistakes if this is indeed what's happening. The first is there are young people on YouTube. Young people use YouTube a lot. My audience, as I've said many times before, is skewed towards older people. I do not have a large audience of young people. But I know other political content creators who do. They have a large young audience, and certainly there'll be other YouTube content creators discussing various issues that overlap with government policy who will also have large young audiences. So if the idea of Labour here is to get through to those large young audiences, they are massively missing a trick. They are missing not all young people get their news on TikTok or Instagram, right? Not all of them, a large number do, not all of them. A lot of them get it from YouTube. So the other thing as well is, yes, Labour are correct in identifying that news media gap with young people. But I would also say the mainstream media don't exactly inform anyone, right? If they're trying to reach people on social media who don't engage with mainstream media, they shouldn't just be thinking, oh, well, young people don't read, and focus on those. No, you should focus on everyone. You should even focus on those who do engage with mainstream media, because those who are on social media can get then like some real news instead of like relying on what the Daily Mail want to spin. Okay, so I do have hesitations about this. I think it's a good step. I think it's a really good step. Ironically, what worries me, I'd be much more happier about this if they were announcing this as something they were going to do. The fact that they're basically saying they've been doing this for the best part of a year makes me think, oh, really? Because we haven't seen any benefit in the polls on this. And yes, okay, these things can take time to bed in, and it's an ongoing process. But I would also say that they have gaps. I hope that there are some major YouTubers. I'm hoping that they're including YouTube as part of this, because that's a massive platform. But if they're not, they need to, because there's lots of young people there. But also, they shouldn't just be doing this to connect with young people. They should be doing it to connect with everyone, including my audience, because the older audience is what I mean by that, because they are not getting the right information from mainstream media anyway. I mean, are Labour seriously looking at the way the mainstream media are reporting on their work and thinking, yeah, they're doing all right by us, it's just a shame not everyone reads it? That would be a mad situation. That would be an insane reading of it. So that's what I would say. This is very good. It's not enough. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.